Hello, hello. Welcome everybody to today's edition of Munch and Learn. I'm Elizabeth Sloan, your hostess and public programs coordinator at the Dixon. So we'll go over a few reminders and pieces of housekeeping before we start. We're recording this session and you can find each week's talk published on the Dixon's YouTube channel. So if you ever want to revisit a talk or recommend one to a friend, you can find them there. And since we're recording, we're going to ask for everyone to remain on mute the entire time. If for some reason you accidentally unmute, please don't be offended if we do mute you. If you have any questions during the talk, please feel free to type them into the chat, and afterwards I'll read them to our speaker and you'll get those questions answered. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Julie Pierotti. Julie is the Martha R. Robinson Curator at the Dixon Gallery and Gardens. Since arriving at the Dixon in 2007, she has organized a number of exhibitions for the museum, including the 2018 show, The Real Beauty, The Artistic World of Eugenia Errázuriz. And with that, I will turn it over to Julie. Take it away.
Hi guys, hi everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to hang with me on Zoom for a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can start looking at pictures. And okay, Elizabeth, what do you see?
I see your PowerPoint.
Do you see the notes or is it just full screen?
It's not full screen.
Okay.
But I don't see the notes.
How about now?
Now it's full screen.
Okay, cool. Great. Okay. I have two screens. I have a laptop screen and a desktop screen, so they don't always match up. So anyway, so I wanted to thank you all for coming today. And I think it's a cool thing that we're here together talking about a painting in the Dixon's collection, because I don't know if you know, but it's September 1st, which is 901 day. And since we're in the 901 area code, it's nice to be celebrating something, a little treasure that we have here in Memphis. And of course, I think the Dixon is Memphis's greatest treasure. So thanks for taking time out of your 901 day to celebrate something special here, here in Memphis. So hopefully you all, everybody that's on this Zoom, hopefully you're all members of the Dixon. And maybe if you are, and the name Victoria Duborg might ring a bell, because this painting, this 2000 still life with brioche that we acquired in 2019 is kind of a new friend here at the Dixon, a new painting in our collection. We bought it for the collection at the end of 2019. We had some funds from a bequest from Cecil Marshall, and we were able to put that toward the purchase of this painting, and I love it. It's just been a really perfect addition to our collection. And we've had it on view pretty much since we bought it. So right now it's in the library, and I'll have a little slide of that toward the end of my talk. So these Munch and Learns, and I probably have talked about this before, but when we're planning these, planning our newsletter, really, Lindley, Elizabeth's predecessor, would contact us like months, sometimes, 5-6 months before the actual day of your talk, to start planning what you're going to ask you what you're going to do for your Munch and Learn for that quarter. And I think, thinking about this quarter, we have our Wayne Thiebaud 100 exhibition on view right now. I think at the time, ooh, hang on just a second. At the time, we were kind of deep into working on this little thing. This is our new collection catalog. It will be in our gift shop this October. So I think we were deep into studying our collection. So I thought, ooh, Victoria Dubourg, there's a brioche in her painting. And I wrote the entry for that one. There's a brioche in her painting, and Wayne Thiebaud's all about pastries and sweets and things like that in his work. So I thought it would be kind of a logical connection. Then as I started to really start working on this Munch and Learn, a couple weeks ago or whatever, I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be kind of a little bit of a stretch to make the connection. But then I was happy to find out that it's not, because there are things about both artists that are similar. And certainly Wayne Thiebaud was looking at Fantin-Latour, Victoria Dubourg's husband, when he started really embracing still life as a genre in his own work. So I've come to see they have more in common. Does this work? Yes. Obviously, they're both artists are known as dedicated practitioners of still life throughout their career. And we see here the beginning of a couple of common elements in their work. So we have this knife that's in the Victoria Dubourg's painting, and the knife that's in this pastel that's on view at the Dixon right now. And then, of course, the pastries. Pastries occur occasionally in Victoria Dubourg's work, but all the time in Wayne Thiebaud's work throughout his career. It's a huge theme for him. Duborg was a careful studier of texture. So we see that in the flakiness of the brioche, and actually just the attention to the details of the texture of everything in her composition. So like the silver pot, the apple, the nut, the handle of the knife, the blade of the knife, the champagne flute, the porcelain, everything. Thiebaud also studies texture and really communicates it in the way that he applies paint to his canvases. And they called that, the method, I guess, that Thiebaud uses simultaneity. So meaning that what you're looking at, actually, the paint actually mimics the object that it's trying to illustrate. So the way that Thiebaud uses white paint in this painting of slices of Boston cream pie looks like whipped cream, but it's really just white paint. I also think that there's a correlation between both artists have this sort of, I don't know, with Thiebaud, the word deadpan gets used a lot. So this deadpan sense of, deadpan sense of humor, but it's really just still life for still life's sake. There's not so much of a, not a lot of the baggage, I guess, that comes with some still life painting that has this kind of vanitas theme to it, this idea of, the transitory nature of life, about how things bloom. You think of this sometimes with Dutch Golden Age still life painting, how things bloom and then they die, or fruit ripens and then it rots. You don't really get that necessarily in Victoria Dubourg's work, and you don't either in Wayne Thiebaud's paintings. I also thought both students, Victoria Dubourg and Wayne Thiebaud, are both wonderful students of art history. Victoria Dubourg certainly, from the beginning of her career, starts going to the Louvre and copying works of art there, and that's where she draws a lot of inspiration for her painting. Wayne Thiebaud also is a very knowledgeable student of art history, and I think a lot of times his work references some of his art historical predecessors, I think. So he's really a fan of, the next slide, yeah, of Chardin, and so was Victoria Dubourg. So Chardin is a French painter from the 18th century, who you may have seen if you took art history 101 in college. I guess this would be 102 because it would be the second semester of the survey of art history. You may have seen his the genre paintings that are like Grace Before Supper or The Little Boy Blowing Bubbles. I think that one's at the National Gallery of Art in Washington. But he's also known for these very simple and very humble still life paintings, like the one that's on the right of your screen now. And Thibaut has cited Chardin as an influence, and definitely Henri Fantin-Latour, and Victoria Dubourg certainly was influenced by Chardin in her own work. A lot of, again, it's still life without an agenda. It's just still life for the sake of studying different textures and kind of stretching yourself with putting together different types of compositions. Okay, so Victoria Dubourg, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her today. But I want to note that a lot of what we know about her and a lot of her story, visually, at least today, how we're going to talk about her, is tied into or gleaned from the stories of the male artists of her time. Specifically her husband, Fantin-Latour, and some of the other artists that she and her husband were friends with, including Edgar Degas and Edouard Manet. So her obscurity as a painter, if she's not as well known as you know she should be, as her husband is, there's a few reasons for that. Number one, she, I think, definitely prioritized her husband's career maybe over her own. She, you know, pushed herself in her career and she put herself out there in her career. But also there's a little bit of maybe a little confusion. Sometimes she signs her, most of the time she signs her work, if she signs it, either V. Duborg or VD, which is the case in the Dixon's painting. Every once in a while, you'll get a Fantin-Latour in her signature. So there's that a little bit of name confusion. A lot of her work is undated, so it's hard to track. And also she's working in the still life genre for the most part. So there's a little bit of a less prestige, I think, with still life painting than with some other genres of work. So just a little bit about her. She's born in Paris to a very cultured family. This is them. There they are. This is them, you know, later on in 1878. She lived in Germany. Her family lived in Germany for a while in her youth. Her father taught French to German students. Later on, her sister Charlotte, this is Charlotte, this is Victoria in this painting. So this is a sketch of her and then a painting of her years later. Her sister Charlotte would eventually teach German to French students once they had moved back to Paris. But this time she spent in Germany gave her this love of German culture, specifically German literature and German music, that she would share with Fantin, who also had this kind of love of specifically of German music. And that would kind of influence certain aspects of their painting, of their artistic output, and also of, you know, the things they explored in their own time with their friends and fellow artists. So sometimes there's records of Victoria would read German literature. She would translate German literature for Fantin and their friends for fun when they would have people over to their house. So Victoria starts studying painting in probably the early 1860s. She works with an artist named Fanny Charon, and there's not a lot of information out there on Fanny Charon, but she studied with her, and I think studied figure painting with her, and probably still life as well. In the mid 1860s, she gets her little card, her permit to sketch and copy in the Louvre. And that will really become the Louvre will be her center for her social life for a while. You know, of course, men can go to these cafes and meet and talk about, you know, politics and art and all different, you know, subjects there. But the cafe is not an acceptable place for a woman to go. So the Louvre will be her home base, her kind of escape, I think. And she becomes very dedicated to copying in the Louvre. She's particularly fond of Chardin, who we talked about just a little while ago. And this artist, Willem Kalf, a Dutch Golden Age still life painter who has several paintings in the Louvre. So she would go there and copy those paintings and study them and learn from them and kind of, you know, apply some of the things from these paintings to her own work that she would do independently. So at the Louvre, that's where she meets. First, she meets in the mid-1860s, Edouard Manet and Edgar Degas. So she becomes friends with them about 1864, 65, somewhere in there. And they become friends. And pretty soon after that, Degas starts working on this little sketch of her that will become a finished portrait. He's obviously charmed by her and produces a really nice and pleasant and charming likeness of her. It's full of life. She appears lovely. This sketch will get reworked into another study. Actually, this study, the one on the left, just sold this past summer. I can't believe, I wish I had gotten some kind of alert for it. And I didn't end up seeing what the sale price was. But wouldn't that be cool to have if we had a painting by her? So the end result is this painting on the right that is in Toledo's collection, the collection of the Toledo Museum of Art, this portrait of Victoria Dubourg. And it's really regarded as one of Degas' best and most sympathetic, I think, most positive images of women that he made throughout his career. So a lot of times you think of Degas' portraits of, or paintings of dancers or bathers or performers. And sometimes there's a little bit of, I don't know, not criticism to them, but there's a little bit of his wit to them, maybe, I don't know, sarcasm, something to it where he's commenting on them and what they're doing. But there's none of that in this portrait of Victoria. He's painting her as an equal. She's looking directly at him. And kind of, I think, portraying her as a friend. There's no real flattery going on here, I don't think. It's just kind of an honest and straightforward portrait. Just as, they had probably an honest and straightforward friendship. She is not trying to be coquettish or seductive or anything like that. She's just posing for a portrait for a friend, I think. So around this time, Victoria begins working at submitting paintings to the Salon. And in 1868, she has her first work accepted to the Paris Salon, and it's a still life. And so her career is kind of going in a really good direction. And this is about the time that she meets Henri Fantin-Latour, who will become her husband years later. Now, there's conflicting dates about when she and Fantin actually met. So a lot of sources say 1899. But what I've found is, let me see if I have this. Where did I put that book? I have a book on Fantin. Here it is. By Kevin's old friend, Douglas Druick. This is the 1983, I think, catalog on Fantin from the Art Institute. And this book says that they met in 1866. And one other source says 1866, but everything else says 1869. Anyway, they met in the mid to late 1860s, while they were both sketching this painting, Correggio's Mystic Marriage of St. Catherine. They were both copying this painting at the Louvre, and they met each other. At this point, Fantin is already a pretty decently well-known painter. Doesn't this portrait, his self-portrait, looks a little scary, a little intense? But he's kind of is starting to make a splash in Paris for his these large group paintings that he does, and for his still life. So at this point in the late 1860s, let's just say it's the late 1860s, he's already done his painting Hommage à Delacroix, which is a big group portrait that has a lot of the great artists of the age included in it. He's also making these really beautiful still lifes as well. So the connection between Fantin and Victoria Dubourg is instant. And they become pretty inseparable pretty quickly. They are kindred spirits. They are interested in the same thing. They both believe that an artist's best education is not in a classroom or working under a master, but copying the masters at the Louvre. They feel like that's the best place to learn about art, is to look at some of the great and really study some of the great works of art in history. So they become friends and kindred spirits. At this point, before they meet each other, they're both still life painters. They're both interested in and dedicated to still life painting. But when they meet that and get together and become an item, I guess, they really, their dedication to that genre really intensifies. And they become so close as a couple that it sparks. Oh, I forgot I put this slide in there. Yeah, they're both, I should mention that they will both, the Victoria Dubourg and Fantin-Latour will become the great practitioners of still life in late 19th century Paris. Okay, they're really pretty unrivaled in terms of their dedication and their skill in the genre at the time. Now, there were other artists kind of a half a generation or a generation ahead of them that were looking at still life, and that's Francois Bonvin and one of my favorites, my little friend, Félix Cal, who were also really exploring still life in the middle of the 19th century. But Victoria Dubourg and Fantin will really take that up toward the end of the century, and they'll become really, like I said, unrivaled in terms of what they're doing, what they're able to accomplish with still life in the traditional sense of still life at this time. So their friendship and their relationship becomes so intense that it sparks a little jealousy, I think, from the woman on the left of your screen, that's Berthe Morisot. So her correspondence is published, and we have the book in our library, or I borrowed it from Kevin, because I think, Kevin, you brought this to my attention as we were working on our collection catalog, that she, in 1869, she had gone to the 1869 salon, and afterwards wrote to a friend about it. And she said, it's kind of, kind of not very nice, or a little gossipy. She wrote to her friend, "However, I did look for our friend Fantin. His insignificant little sketch was hung incredibly high and looked extremely forlorn. I finally found him, but he disappeared before I could say a word about his exhibit. I do not know whether he was avoiding me or whether he was conscious of the worthlessness of his work. I certainly think that his excessive visits to the Louvre and to Mademoiselle Dubourg bring him no luck." So kind of like, ouch. I think that maybe not everybody loved their relationship. And this little sketch in the middle is a sketch for the painting that that Bertha Morisot is referencing from the 1869 Salon. So I don't know that Victoria Dubourg and Bertha Morisot were the best of friends. That's all I really know about it. But obviously we know how she felt, how Morisot felt in 1869. So later that year, despite what Bertha Morisot thought, Fantin and Victoria Dubourg become engaged. And as a present, as an engagement gift, he gives her this still life, which is known as now the engagement. And I think it's a beautiful kind of celebration, beautiful token of their love and affection for each other. This will be a very long engagement. And this kind of reminds me of some like Downton Abbey. These relationships take a long time to become official. At this time, Fantin's father is ill. He has a sister who will eventually become institutionalized. So I think he's got a lot going on in his life, and wants to wait for his life, I guess, to get settled down a little bit before they get married. But they do become engaged in 1869, and this is the same moment that Fantin painted the Dixon still life. And it's got some of the similar components that will be in a lot of Victoria Dubourg's work, this plain background, a lot of times a mix of fruit and flowers in the composition, this white compote, variations on this white compote will be in a lot of compositions of both artists. Victoria also began modeling for Fantin around this time, along with her sister Charlotte, seen here. So this is Victoria here, and this is Charlotte. So they posed together for this painting, La Lecture. Victoria is reading aloud, which is what she was known to do. This is a contemporary painting, but I think it is in line with what Fantin's figure paintings were like. Very, tighter brushwork than maybe some of his contemporaries. But, they're still wearing contemporary clothes. Victoria will also paint. Charlotte is going to be a figure in their relationship for the rest of their lives. Charlotte will be a frequent model for both artists. So Victoria paints her sister, and Fantin will paint his sister-in-law over the years. She doesn't seem to be a third wheel, really. She's more like a best friend, in fact, and also, going along with gossip. Michelle Hoog, who is Douglas Druitt's co-author of this book, seems to imply that there may have been some kind of understanding between Victoria and Charlotte and Henri Fantin-Latour. Like maybe there was a little bit more to Henri Fantin-Latour and Charlotte Dubourg's relationship than just brother and sister-in-law. But I think that's all, just gossip a little bit. We have no way of confirming that, and I don't think we're going to do that today. But she is a frequent model for both. She never gets married or has children, and Victoria and Henri Fantin-Latour don't as well. So they are really each other's, at a certain point, they are each other's family. They are the family that they have, and they spend a lot of time together. So Victoria starts at this point a pretty steady output during her engagement. Beautiful still life paintings, florals and different objects mixed in. The vase that's in this painting, is similar to the one a few slides back that's in the engagement still life. So it's kind of a little bit of a seek and find as you go through both artists' work to see which elements, which objects appear in each other's still lifes. And Victoria continues to model for for her fiance at this point. And the painting on the left, the portrait of her, it was shown at the 1873 salon, and it's kind of calm and controlled, very, an honest depiction of her. And generally, a lot of times she's shown reading, and she was known to be a really smart woman. Like I said, she's fluent in German and is a great lover of German literature. So she's shown reading a lot. And I think this must be some kind of study for this work where she's looking down and probably reading as well. So I wanted to look at some of her paintings, Victoria's paintings from this period. They really show off her skill and her incredible attention to detail. This is a still life that was recently acquired by the Toledo Museum of Art. So now they have the portrait of her by Degas, and they now have a painting by her in their collection. And I love this one for this detail where you really get to see the basket, kind of the weaving of the basket, which I think is really nice, and the texture and the shape of the peaches in the basket is really beautiful too. So I think their relationship really ups the game in both of their work in terms of what they produce in still lifes. So in late 1875, Fontane's father dies, and he gets a little money from that, and at this point decides that he and Victoria will now get married. So they get married November 16th of 1876 at St. Thomas Aquinas Church in Paris, which is very close, pretty close to the Musée d'Orsay in that neighborhood of Paris. So they get married. They're in love. They're very happy. He paints this little, intimate sketch of her the year that they get married, which I think is very sweet. This one also went up for sale fairly recently, maybe a couple of years ago. They move into, or Victoria moves into Fontane's house, which thanks to the magic of Google Maps, we can look at now. It's this one with the graffiti all over the door on the Rue de Beaux-Arts, which is also kind of close by. And in this house will become their Paris home base for the rest of their lives. There's a studio, there's space for a studio in this home. And it seemed that they shared a working space, but had separate studios here. So there was kind of maybe two studios connected by a space that was where they stored their, the objects that they used, or maybe kind of like I said, just a shared space for both artists. And their home will become a place where they hosted their friends. They hosted small gatherings of the artists and writers that they were close to. This is a little shot of Fontaine later on in the inside of his studio. And one of their frequent guests was this guy. Do y'all remember, any loyal Dixonians may remember this little painting from our 2011 Jean-Louis Forain exhibition. This was in that show. And this is a little portrait of Jacqueline Blanche, who is the artist who created our portrait of Eugenia Errázuriz that's in our collection. So just a little Dixon small world. But Jacqueline Blanche is kind of the, I don't even know if this guy's still around, but the Perez Hilton of late 19th century and early 20th century Paris. So he's kind of a gossipy guy. And he is friends with a lot of these artists. His father was a psychologist, a doctor that was a great art collector and hosted salons at his house. So Jacques-Emile grows up in this, community of artists and writers, and he's a frequent guest at different artists' homes, including Victoria Dubourg and Fantin-Latour. So he goes over there to their house, and he said described their studio as a sort of wooden barn painted red, white, and blue. So we can't really tell from black and white photos that the studio space that they had was painted red, white, and blue, but he also said that it had an air of hopelessness to it, which it seems kind of sad. I don't know what he means by that. But like I said, he's kind of a gossipy guy. So sometimes his writings are not as, we shouldn't take them. We should take them with a grain of salt, I think. Oh, also across the street from them for a certain period, in the 1880s, this guy lives there. This is Charles Ethan Porter. He is an American artist who goes to Paris, and we have last year in 2020 acquired this still life, bowl of cherries, and he lived across the street from them. So his work, Porter's work, has a very Fantin/Duborg type quality to it, where it's just still life for still life's sake, I think. These simple and honest still life paintings. And I think he's definitely influenced by them, especially having spent time in Paris and such close proximity to them. So we actually have Bowl of Cherries and Victoria Dubourg's paintings both installed in the same room in the library in the Dixon residence right now. So you can make that connection for yourself then. So they settled into this kind of comfortable, the Dubourg Fantin household settled into this comfortable and very productive life. And Fantin was really, at this point, he didn't have a lot of family. Like I said, his father had died. One of his sisters was in a sanatorium, and his other sister had married I think someone from Russia and had moved to Russia. So she was kind of out of the picture. So the Dubourg family was really the family that Fantin had in Paris. And they, like I said, accepted them. And he painted this portrait of them just 2 years after they got married. It was completed 2 years after they got married. I know he started on it sooner. So here's Victoria here. She's sort of simple. And looking directly out at us, very dutiful, with her hand on her mother's shoulder. And then here's Charlotte. Charlotte is the one that's dressed to go out, and seems a little bit more emancipated or free than Victoria does. So Charlotte has a job. She is a teacher. She teaches German. She kind of has a more, I guess, a less traditional life, a more independent life, maybe, than her sister even does. We already knew, he'd already painted Victoria and Charlotte before. Oh, I thought this was fun to see. Some of the sketches or kind of parodies of these paintings that are shown at the salon. And this one appeared in The Mask in June of 1879. A little kind of caricature of the actual painting. So around this time, the Victoria Dubourg and Fantin-Latour start spending time in Duborg, which is where this little dot is on the map, in Lower Normandy. So this is Normandy, but it's not on the Normandy coast. And this was there was a little house that Victoria's uncle owned. And around 1878, they start spending their summers there. Actually, I think her uncle dies, in 79 or 80, and then the house officially becomes theirs. So Duborg is going to become their kind of summer home base, and for the rest of both of their lives. In fact, Fantin-Latour dies there, and Victoria Dubourg will die there as well. So it's kind of their home away from home, I guess. And there was an overgrown, was described as an overgrown cottage garden there. And I think that's what we're looking at in this little painting by Duborg. This garden provided them with a lot of inspiration for their paintings and cut flowers for their still lifes. Also, there's a flower market in town that they go to, probably almost daily in the summer months while they're living there. And they use those compositions they use those flowers for still life compositions that they will make. So during their time in Duret, a lot of their art output, their artistic output, are these floral still lifes. So, and that's going to be a lot of what she makes going forward. And so what happens to all these still lifes? Well, Fantin had a friend, a couple of, a pair of friends, I guess, a couple that lived in London. So it's Mr. and Mrs. Edwin Edwards, Edwin and Ruth Edwards. Edwin Edwards was a collector. He was an etcher and an engraver. He was an artist himself, but he was also an attorney and an art collector. And he meets Fantin in the early 1860s when Fantin is up in London with Whistler and Alphonse Legros. And they become friends, and really almost like Edwards becomes kind of his unofficial dealer in London and really finds a market for Fantin's still lifes. And once he and Duborg get together for her paintings as well. So in Duret, they would paint these floral still lifes and send a big chunk of them, or take a big chunk of them to London, to the Edwards, and they would sell them or find buyers for them in London, in England, on behalf of the artists. And so that was a system that worked really well for both of them. It was very lucrative for both artists. And Edwin Edwards dies in 1879, and after he dies, Ruth Edwards keeps that going for several years. So one painting I love that I was happy to find a good image of is this one. This kitchen still life is surely one of her masterworks. It has this nice range of textures in it. So we get, tomatoes, celery, this little carrot peeking out, cauliflower, lettuce, these, this kind of starched table linen here, a copper pot, a ceramic pot, the spoon here, the wooden table, all different kinds of things going on. And so I love this painting. I think it's real complex for her. And really in this great still life tradition of painting these kitchen compositions, things that would be laying around a kitchen. So Bonvin is known for this, these humble arrangements of humble objects, of everyday objects, but with a really close understanding of light and shadow. Bonvin's his dark backgrounds are a little bit more dramatic than Victoria Dubourg's, but you know what they remind me of? Do y'all, if y'all were here in 2019, I know pre-COVID, it's hard to remember some things, but we had a show on William McGregor Paxton and Elizabeth Oakey Paxton. And Elizabeth Paxton had a number of these kitchen still lifes, these compositions of objects that would be found laying around a kitchen. And Duborg's still life reminds me of those paintings too. So I thought that was kind of fun to look at. Corner of a Table is another painting that she made around this time. The idea of a painting depicting a corner of a table was a subject that appeared in Fantin's work. Certainly one of his most important paintings of the 1870s is this one, a group painting called Corner of a Table that's got a number of French artists and writers in it. But also there's this still life called Corner of a Table that is the same, table that's in this composition and some of the same objects that are in it. That is, an important still life by Fantin. So Victoria Dubourg's version of this also has, some of these elements where you're mixing fruit and, different types of serving pieces like the silver coffee pot and the silver tray and a little bit of flour, this carnation that's laying around here, and all of this on this starched white tablecloth. So, but looking at Fantin's Corner of a Table, I see a couple of things that might be in the Dixon's still life, our still life with brioche. So we see in these two paintings, the same silver pot right here, and then the white compote that's over here as well, that appears in ours. So it makes, I went to Kevin's office yesterday and I thought, I think we might need to rethink the date on our still life, and thinking about, the types of paintings that both artists were making, both Dubourg and Fantin were making. So I think maybe our painting could have been done a little earlier. I mean, we don't have, there's no date on the back of the painting or anything like that, but it's just something to think about. But even I think in some ways, is this, it's a different piece of porcelain, a different object, but it can almost, if you look hard enough, you can almost see the swirl pattern on the teacup here that's in the chocolate pot that's in Duborg's composition. So it's just something to think about. And with brioche as a subject, Edward Manet is also painting still lifes with using brioche in the 1870s. And the brioche is this kind of interesting thing to add, the brioche bun, an interesting thing to add to a still life composition, because it has this kind of, definitely an irregular form to it, that really, kind of rhymes with the apple and the nut and this little, peony bud over here, and contrasts with the kind of defined shapes of the compote and the silver pot and the champagne flute too. So Victoria Dubourg she'll continue painting floral still lifes throughout the, for the remainder of the 19th century. We have these two really pretty paintings of delicate narcissus here. She paints these, still life with pink and white stock here. So these are the types of paintings, certainly this one, that was probably made at Duborg when she has access to this flower market, and these really pretty colorful, spring and summer flowers are available. There's also this painting, this floral still life with dahlias and zinnias in it as well. And carnations are a flower that appears pretty frequently in her work. And at the 1894 salon, she shows a painting of carnations there. Here it is. Victoria Dubourg, and this is the French word for carnations there. I don't know that it's this specific painting that is on the screen, because she painted carnations repeatedly throughout her career. But I did want to say that, of course, you Dixonians may know that our other Fantin still life is a painting of carnations. And there's a lot of instances where Victoria Dubourg's work and Fantin's work are of the same, they're painting the same types of flowers, they're painting the same types of subjects. And of course, this makes sense. They're husband and wife, they're working in the same space, and they're both still life painters. So there's definitely going to be overlap in each other's work throughout their careers. So here's two instances of them painting different varieties of apple blossoms. And Victoria Dubourg, the painting on the left, is by her. She also dipped into this genre of painting that Fantin was kind of devoted to throughout his career, his fantasies, these types of paintings and prints as well, depicting kind of mythological subjects, subjects that are these female figures that are personifications of music, of dancing, of literature that he made throughout his career. Dubourg kind of explores those, not too terribly much that I have been able to find, but she does explore it sometimes. But I really wanted to kind of, I want to challenge the idea that, or Duborg's classification as the other Fantin-Latour or Fantin's best pupil. And even sometimes I think some of her paintings are described as worthy of the master, meaning worthy of the name Fantin-Latour, like her husband is, like she is secondary to her husband, because I think for so much of their careers, they're working side by side. It's just, over time, his name has stuck around, and her name has become less well known. So we're here today. We're trying to fix that. So after the turn of the century, Fantin becomes ill. He's kind of off and on sick, and she's taking care of him at Paris and at Duborg. And he dies on August 25th, 1904, I think. And his funeral, actually, I just saw this, was on September 1st in Paris, 95 years ago. And so maybe it's 1905, 1906. And no, more than 95 years ago. Y'all know math isn't my thing. And so right after he died, so this is a photograph of him kind of later in his life, and you can see the Dubourg family portrait stays with them in their studio. After he died, and this is a picture of Victoria later in life, she she dedicates herself to compiling the catalog raisonné of her husband's work. This became her mission. It's her passion. It's what she really puts all of herself into in the years after he died. The book was published, and here it is here. The book was published in 1911 and really is still the definitive record of Fantin's work. There was a reprint of it that was done in the 1960s, late 1960s, and it was really just, pretty much unrevised version of the book that Victoria Dubourg put together. And look, you can see in this picture of their studio, the painting that he did of her right after they got married. Isn't that sweet? So she did continue painting after he died, although her output really slowed because she's putting so much of her energy and her time into compiling this record, the catalog raisonné. She, most of what she does later in her career is floral still life. Her last known painting was completed in 1916, and it was a floral painting, I think a painting of roses. And then years later, in 1926, she dies at Duborg, at their country home. So since then, she's fallen into and really kind of fallen into a little bit of obscurity because several reasons. They didn't have children. So she and her sister Charlotte died just a few years before her. So there was no one to do the work on her career that she had done for Fantin after he died. So there was nobody really that was carrying on her legacy, whose mission was to ensure, that her legacy was preserved. Like I said, a lot of her work is unsigned. And over the years, oftentimes her work got attributed to her husband. So if it was unsigned, many times the work, the paintings, and we saw, just a few slides ago, how similar their style was, and they often embraced the same subjects, how oftentimes her work became known as Henri Fantin-Latour, was attributed to Henri Fantin-Latour. But hopefully this can change, and I think we're doing the right thing here today by talking about her. In the first wave of art historical feminism, there was an article written on her in the Women's Art Journal called, I think it was just called The Other Fantin-Latour. That was the first real research that was published on her. And hopefully there's more to come. Would love to find out more about her. There's no letters, her letters are not preserved, her papers, her nothing really on her career is preserved. So a lot of what we're able to glean to come to know about her is taking bits and pieces from, her own scholarship, the letters that her husband wrote, and just bits and pieces from other artists' stories. But so certainly there's more work to do, and look forward to doing it over the years and getting to know her work better. But I think it's fun that we're able to talk about her today in connection with an artist who seems so different, Wayne Thiebaud. And hopefully, like I said, this can be the beginning of something deeper on her work. So if you come to the Dixon today, we have this Dubourg Still Life with Brioche is installed in our library. And we put together a little still life of our own to go next to it with some decorative arts objects in our own collection, some English porcelain, some silver that we have, and some French porcelain. So we tried to have a compote, some silver, a knife in there, and some French porcelain. So I think that was something kind of fun for us to do. And yeah, I just wanted to thank you all for listening to me today. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. And hope you'll come see this and come see Wayne Thiebaud, the Wayne Thiebaud exhibition, which is on view through September 26th, 27th. So you've got a few more weeks to come see that, and maybe come look at Thiebaud's work, knowing that he was influenced by Fantin-Latour, and that Victoria Dubourg and Thiebaud share a similar influence, or the same influence in Chardin. So that's what I have for my talk today. If y'all have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And thank you for spending some of your 901 day with me. And hopefully you can spend some of this afternoon by coming up here and seeing the show.
All right, we do have some questions in the chat. So also,
okay, great.
If anybody thinks of any more questions, just write them in the chat, and I will be happy to read them. Okay, our first question comes from Kevin.
Oh, hey, Kevin.
In Degas' portrait of Victoria Dubourg, the pose is almost mannish. Even Fantin's portraits don't particularly speak to her femininity. Charlotte is portrayed much more girlishly in the family portrait. Does our Victoria Dubourg still life seem more masculine or feminine?
I agree with you that she doesn't have the idea, I guess, of this two sisters. Charlotte is more of the glamorous one. Man, gosh, I can relate to that with my own sister. I feel like my sister was kind of the pretty one, was always the pretty one when we were growing up. I don't even know if she's on here. She would hate to hear me say that. But yeah, Victoria is always shown as a little more plain and simple and humble, where her sister's a little more glam, I guess. In terms of our own still life, I don't know if I'd give it, if it strikes me as being particularly feminine. I mean, it does have that pink flower in it, and the French porcelain with the kind of twist to it that seems, or the ripple kind of effect that seems a little bit, kind of feminine. But I don't know that I'd classify, that I would look at hers right away at our painting and be like, oh, a woman painted that for sure. So I don't know if I could assign our painting a gender. I don't think I can do that.
All right, thank you. All right, our next question comes from Bryce. Is Victoria Dubourg known only for her still lifes? And is it true that during this period, female artists were slotted as still life painters?
Well, she is mainly known for still life. I mean, there are a few figure paintings that she did, but they're mostly of her sister. And still life this was something we kind of talked about with the Paxton show when we had that in 2019. It was a genre of painting for women that was kind of easily accessible for women, because they were more confined to the home than men were. I mean, think about men are painting, you know, of course, Fantin's painting these like group portraits, but there's artists like Manet who are painting cafe subjects. Well, a respectable woman couldn't really go there. So still life and portraits of other women become kind of a common, you know, subject for women artists. Think of Berta Morisot's paintings of like the woman of the cradle, the woman looking at the baby in the cradle, or Mary Cassatt's images of mothers and children. So they're not necessarily going out in public and painting, you know, scenes of modern life in Paris. So still life is kind of an acceptable and really kind of easy and convenient genre for them to focus on.
All right, great. Our next question comes from Kevin again. Do we know if C.E. Porter met the Fantin-Latours?
I have to go back into when I wrote the Porter entry, and I did the Porter. I did a talk on Porter last year. I don't know that I know for sure that he did, but I have to think he did. I mean, he was like right across the street from them. I don't know that he would have been invited into their home at that time. But I have to think that they met each other, and you know, Porter goes to Paris with this letter of introduction from Mark Twain that gets him into different artist studios and different places throughout Paris. So maybe that was his ticket to meet the Fantin-Latours. I'm not sure. But thanks for the additional question, Kevin.
All right. Do we have any other questions from anybody?
Let's see.
Okay.
Hi, Margarita.
Okay. Well, thank you for attending, everyone. Next week's program will be given by artist Noah Fodry. If you aren't currently a Dixon member, we invite you to renew or join. We'd be grateful to add your name to the list of members who help make the Dixon the special place it is. We invite you to come in person to the Dixon to see the current exhibitions by Wayne Thibault and Matt Greeley. Our air conditioning works great. Not that's necessarily an issue today, but unless you want to get out of the humidity. Though it is less humid in here. Have a great week, everyone. Thank you for coming, and thank you again, Julie, for speaking with us today.
Thanks, guys. Come visit soon.